Next is Lady T. Have a great afternoon.
Hello and welcome to the promo for Always Digging. My name is Jeff Skull, aka DJ Scully Funk. Favorite songs that fit that theme. Tune in right here every Sunday from noon to 2 on iLive Radio.
Every Friday, take a trip around the world with music from around the globe. Colors of Rhythm with your host DJ Ron John. Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on iLive Radio, iliveradio.com.
Hey, what's going on, everybody in cyberspace? This is The Groove Show with your boy, the crowd pleaser, DJ Mark Anthony. Don't forget, each and every Saturday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m., we want to put you in the mood for whatever the night has in store. I'm playing only the best feel-good, party rocking, body-shaking music from funk to soul to reggae to R&B, house to salsa, and much, much more. We call it The Groove each and every Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Keep it locked. It's the crowd pleaser, baby. You know how we do. We'll see you on the air. Peace.
Attention all musicians, bands, associations, clubs, and organizations that represent collective styles of music across Canada. Now is the time to rebuild our collective music nation genres like hip-hop, R&B, jazz, soul, reggae, gospel, and more united. The Collective Music Nation is a non-profit organization committed to the development of collective music. Free memberships are available now. The Collective Music Nation. One voice, strength in unity.
You're listening to iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio. iLive Radio.
The number one hit music station.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Womanhood. I am your host, Lady T.
And I am Tanya Nicole.
Perfect. And today we will be discussing boundaries in marriage and in relationships, romantic relationships. So this is kind of a spin-off of our topic on boundaries on a whole that we had a couple of weeks ago with our great guests, Anissa and Krista. And today we're lucky enough to have Krista come back on again to help us through the conversation and just have the conversation with us and lend her expertise to the world of boundaries as it relates to marriage and relationships. So really excited about this topic today.
Yes, and a little quick background about Krista Courtenay. She is a professional counselor and has worked with individuals, couples, families, and groups in psychotherapy for over 10 years. So we're getting someone with a wealth of experience to share her knowledge and expertise with us, particularly in the area of boundaries, which, as we discussed during our last show last week, how important boundaries are, particularly in relationships, and particularly even more so in intimate relationships. Oftentimes we find that we're unsatisfied or we're not getting exactly what we want out of this relationship, out of our relationships. And sometimes it's simply because we haven't set boundaries or we don't even know what our boundaries are. And just glad to have Krista here to help us navigate through all this stuff so we could all find ourselves in healthy, wholesome relationships moving forward.
Yes, the feedback that we received from our initial boundary conversation was very well received. And a lot of people were like, can you speak about boundaries in relationships in particular, boundaries in marriage in particular? And I was like, sure, why not? So here we are, giving you what you would like to see. But before we do that, let's have a little quick chat. So what's been going on? Actually, we haven't had a quick chat in a while. Usually we have our little 5 or 10 minute conversation. We haven't really been doing that. So what's new in the world of T. Nicole?
Well, other than a very sore back.
Okay.
I'm okay. I'm trying to get my abs back tight and kind of get a little bit more, working out and an exercise regimen back in. And I went to my garage and was trying a new ab workout, and it didn't like my back at all. So
Oh, no.
I'm a little sore after this, show today. I'm going to be laying on my bed and with an ice pack on my back. So that's not fun. And I'm hoping that this is not reality. You know, when they say when you get older, things don't heal quicker. I'm trying to get that out of my head, but I'm starting to feel that way because it's like 5 days and it's still pretty painful. I'm like, no, I'm not hitting that phase where things start to slow down a little bit. So hoping that's not the case. And I'm hoping that my back will be all healthy and healed by the time we head to Dubai in a couple of weeks.
Yes. So our listeners are not aware, but yes, Tina Cole and I are going to Dubai to have a little sister one-on-one, but also to celebrate a birthday of a friend. So we're looking forward to that. So yeah, that's a really cool thing. As for myself, actually, just in response to what you said about age and the things that we start to feel. It is a real thing. And I remember when I was in my 20s and I worked with these ladies, they were older than me, and they used to always complain, oh, you wait till you get to 30 and you wait till you get to 40. And I was like, yeah. But, there is a lot of truth to that. And I remember one time I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and I think we were about 36, 37. And she goes to me randomly one day, do your hips hurt? And I was like, my hips?
Like, no, we're not having that conversation right now.
She's like, yeah. She's like, I realize, like, as I go deeper in my 30s, my hips hurt. And when I ask my friends, they say their hips hurt. But at that time, my hips didn't hurt. I don't know if she jinxed me or what, but like a year or two later, my hips actually started to hurt. And now, being past that beautiful 40 threshold, yeah, there's a few other things that hurt as well. So it's definitely, there is some truth in that. And I think the only way to combat that is, of course, through diet and just consistent exercise, because
Absolutely.
The minute you stop, which is what I did, things hurt so much more. So there is some truth to that. So unfortunately, I think your back will be okay, but yeah, the healing at, the older we get, definitely, I don't think it improves much. We really have to fight more for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyhow, what can we really do?
Right.
But yeah, other than that, for myself, I've just been, trying to keep my head above water, working on different projects as usual, and getting ready for this trip, which is going to be amazing. So yes, but we do have Krista here with us, so I'm going to let her in the room right now. Perfect.
Welcome, Krista.
Hey, Krista.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon.
So good to see you.
Thank you. You guys too.
Yes, welcome back. Welcome back. We, like I mentioned, had some great reviews from our show on boundaries overall. So, we're really excited to have you back to kind of more focus the relationship toward, or focus the conversation rather towards relationships and marriage. So this should be a good one.
Well, I'm excited to be back with you. This is one of my favorite topics. And so I get excited anytime I get a chance to share. Because it's been so transformative just for me in my own life. And then as a therapist as well, the skill is absolutely necessary.
Right. So I'm going to come right out with a really big question that I got out of the book, Boundaries. Okay. And I just would like to kind of get your perspective and for you to add a little bit to it and kind of explain it the best way you can to our audience, because I think it's important. It says, boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not. Could you go into a little bit more detail about what that exactly means? What is that saying?
Sure. That's a very good question and a wonderful place to start. As I mentioned the last time we talked, remembering that boundaries, when you think about it, are a line of some sort that sort of separates one from another. And in our physical world, we have this in many different forms, right? We have fences, we have gates. Most compounds or even production studios, for instance, have, a property line that kind of protects it so that someone is in charge of who comes in and who doesn't. And so emotionally, mentally, physically, in terms of just our energy, who gets it, who doesn't, we really do go through a process of discovery and taking ownership and personal responsibility over the things that are absolutely mine, that pertain to me, that have to do with my feelings, that affect me directly, and understand a lot better what isn't mine. So sometimes when a loved one or someone close to us gets very angry with a decision that we make, we sometimes behave, when you think about it, in a way that demonstrates we feel a sense of responsibility. We made them mad. Right? And when you start to study boundaries and understand that a little bit better, you can be sensitive and understanding that someone might not like or appreciate the decision that you made. But if you have gone through the process of understanding that this is the best decision for me, and while I understand you might not like that, your anger belongs to you. It's not mine to fix. And I need to just kind of let you deal with that, give you some time, and hopefully you understand and we can continue our relationship. But so often it's just commonplace. You know, we grew up with a lot of guilt messages. We grew up not really clearly being taught the difference between me and someone else. You know, you have to share your toys with your siblings, and you have to help your mom with chores. And there's this very blurred property line between responsibility, obligation, what you should or should not do. And that varies from household to household and experience to experience.
Wow.
And so it really is a better, more clear understanding as an adult. And there are ways that you can teach children this as well. But if you're just starting out, more than likely, you're learning how to be personally responsible for the things that belong to you, and learn the difference between what doesn't and how to handle it. Because remember, the whole goal of having healthy boundaries is not to kick people out of your life. It's to have more fulfilling and rewarding, free relationships that are just so much more authentic and deep and respectful of one another.
That's a big point when you talk about, there's actually two things that stood out. One of the things is guilt messages. You know, I like to kind of maybe dive into what that really is. You know, what is guilt messages that contributed to us having lack of boundaries is what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
Right. In Dr. Cloud's book, I was really flabbergasted by this point, because he really describes that there are two types of sort of character flaws that present themselves when it comes to guilt messages and boundaries. One is for the person who uses guilt messages to control someone else's decisions. Now, I say it like that, and it sounds like somebody's like, you know, pulling the strings and muppeteering and mind controlling you, but it's not that always. It's not always that intentional, that someone is intentionally trying to control you. It's just one of the ways that we've learned to kind of get what we want. You know, we use this. We would do it with friends all the time. Oh, okay, since you got a new boyfriend, now you don't have time for me. You know, and if you read between the lines, what we're really saying is, I miss you, and I would really like you to prioritize some time to spend with me. But that sounds too mushy. Like, nobody talks like that. That's not our normal language.
Right.
Yeah. And it can be really subtle, the line between joking about that to make a point and using those types of messages to get people to really change their minds and do what it is that you want them to do. So one type of sort of character flaw that he talks about is the person who uses guilt messages to control someone else's decision, right? So that can sometimes be your mom. Oh, nobody ever checks on me. Oh, woe is me. You know, after all I did for you girls, or after all I did for you kids, you don't do this and you don't do that. And so there's a person who uses guilt messages, right? Sometimes in relationships, it's like, you know, I work so hard to provide for this family, and all you do is complain. It's like, okay, but what am I complaining about? And are we actually hearing each other? It may be a regular complaint, but most of us don't have a process by which we kind of understand when it's okay and when it's not. And so there's a person who uses guilt messages to try to get you to change your mind to do what they want you to do.
Right.
And then this is the one that really got me. There's a person who has this character flaw that they actually respond to guilt messages. So when guilt messages are levied against them,
wow,
they fully take on that responsibility for the other person's anger, change their mind, push past their boundaries, rearrange their schedules, forgo something really important to them to make sure that they rid themselves of that guilt.
Wow.
The problem is, after you go through all of that, yes, the guilt might be gone, but the exhaustion is there. The resources you need for something else that you want to do is not there. The things that you want to build, the things that are on your goals list, were not tended to the way that they needed to be. And so we spend a lot of time trying to eliminate guilt by shooting ourselves in the foot.
Right.
In essence. Yeah, in essence.
Right. And so when you learn healthy boundaries, you learn to read between those guilt messages. You learn to hear the expression of need, the expression of emotion, sometimes the expression of hurt. A lot of times, remember that hurt kind of drives anger in a way, hurt and fear. And so sometimes, depending on the types of relationships that we're in, if you start doing something for yourself that doesn't include me, I begin to feel a little bit threatened by that. But I'm not going to say that because I don't actually know that. I just feel something weird. And I don't want you to do that, but I don't know why. And that's just, sometimes in day-to-day life, it's a lack of self-awareness. It's a lack of understanding about how past relationships or traumas or little hurts or injuries are kind of playing into my life today. But when you start to delve into learning what boundaries actually mean and how to implement them, it is just a clarity and a freedom that helps you to kind of remember that you're in charge of you. And once you learn that, no one can take from you anything that you're not willing to give. That's the power of learning about healthy boundaries, is that I no longer feel afraid for somebody to ask me for something. Oh my God, I hope they're not asking me. Every time the phone rings, oh gosh, is this person calling? I hope they don't need nothing. You don't have that anymore once you realize that people can ask me for whatever they want. And I will have to determine whether or not I can or I can't. It's in my best interest. I want to or I don't want to, and how much I give.
Yeah.
Okay.
I make it sound really simple, but
we will break down all of that into simpler terms. So when it comes to signs that someone needs to put some boundaries in place, what does that look like? So some people, just like you mentioned, they're not aware of the fact that they need to have these boundaries. So what are some signs that someone can look for or maybe sit down and reflect on that would tell them, I need to put some boundaries in place?
Great question. One of them is how you feel after you've agreed to do something. So you want to pay attention to feelings of resentment, right? The feeling of resentment is generally a huge indicator that you're giving more than you want to give. Now, the tricky part about this is that there's a difference between I don't want to do this or today is not the best day, right? So if we keep it simple, sometimes every Sunday somebody calls and asks us to do this and we say yes, even though we don't want to. And afterwards we just feel like, oh, why this person can't just fix this for themselves? Why can't this person just figure this out? Why do they have to keep asking me? And it's like, okay, but you keep saying yes. So where's the need for them to ask somebody else? They're getting their need met through you. And so the first indicator for me is if you look over it and you're doing something, you're expending energy, you're holding space for someone, and you don't really want to. Like internally, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this. That feeling of just, or that feeling of dread every time you have to go to, I don't know, anything, something at church, or you're providing cupcakes for something, or, there's a family member that's kind of always in need, and it never seems to end. Anything that you agree to, it could be babysitting, it could be letting your niece or nephew live with you for the month, anything that you do that makes you feel afterwards like, ugh, I don't want to do this, is a good indicator that something's going on somewhere, and you might need to kind of figure out, where you stand on that, where your boundary actually needs to be. Is it something that you need to adjust in your own attitude? Or is it something that you need to say to someone, I didn't mind doing this the first 2 times, but this seems to be becoming a regular thing, and I'm not really okay with that.
Okay. That sounds really, really good. When I hear you speak of that, it feels more like friendships or maybe close family members, siblings. But as it pertains to your spouse or relationship, it kind of feels like it might take on a different characteristics in that space.
For sure. That's a much more challenging space, especially when, depending on how far into the relationship you are, you probably have some pretty well-established emotional dynamics. So he does this, you do this, your partner does this, and then you say this, and it's the same kind of thing over and over and over again. Or you say to someone, I really don't want to go to this particular event. And then, 2 days later, it's like, yes, but I need you to go. You have to go. A lot of pressure. We don't understand why. And then we go and it's like, oh, I told you I didn't want to go. And there's big attitudes and then quarrel afterwards. A lot of different little things and big things come up in relationships when it comes to boundaries. And so, again, the beginning of it is just trying to understand at first, what are the areas that make me feel like I'm giving more than I want to? And how do I study that a little bit and see which part of that is mine and which part of that do I need to articulate to my partner? So one of the examples, the Boundaries book that I referred to by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend there's a whole series. So there's boundaries in marriage and boundaries in dating. And one of the examples that he gives in the Boundaries in Marriage book is a husband and wife. I think they have 2 children. And the wife consistently requests for the husband to come home from work early enough to sit down and have dinner with them. It's really important to her that they all sit down together as a family and have dinner. Okay. But he continues to come home late. And so she waits for him. Sometimes they're not eating dinner till 8 o'clock. And then the kids are late for bed. And then she's mad and upset because she's been waiting for 2 hours for her husband to come home. Dinner's waiting, and she has to keep everything warm because it's important to her that they sit down as a family to eat supper, but he doesn't hold that same value or attention to what she's asking. So in the book, it talks about, how do you kind of set a boundary where that's concerned? And remember that boundaries are set on yourself. They're not necessarily put on other people. So one of the examples is that she then had a conversation with him and said, you know what? I really don't like when we argue and fuss about dinner time. And I realized that I have been asking you to do something that clearly you don't really want to do. And so I want to apologize for all the times that you came home and I had an attitude, and I was upset. And I was, maybe verbally showing you that I was upset. And I really want to apologize for that. And he's like, whoa, okay, like what's going on here? And she's like, I just need to let you know that in order for me to be okay with your decision to not come home and have dinner with us, I'll be making a couple changes so that I am okay. So I won't wait for you anymore. The kids and I will eat around 6:30 every evening because that works best for our schedules. And I don't mind leaving a plate of food for you in the fridge, but you can then eat whenever you come home. And that way I'm not upset and you get to, come home whenever is convenient for you. Now, the crux of this is that she kind of knew that the one thing he hated was warming up his own food. Like for whatever reason, he didn't like having to do that. Now, she didn't do this on purpose to, like, get at him, but it was understanding that I am upset. You clearly aren't. So if this upsets me, I need to make an adjustment because I'm in charge of me. And I need to lower my expectation for that particular action because you're not doing it. And so it's important to me. You can communicate your boundary, but I'm not going to put myself in a position to be waiting for you anymore. Okay? And so what started to happen is that she let go of all the hurt and resentment and all of that she had against him. So whenever he got home, she was quite loving and attentive, but he warmed up his own food and the kids had already eaten. They were ready for bed. She was relieved. She felt better and she wasn't holding all of that towards her husband.
Okay.
Eventually, he got the point and started to come home earlier and have supper with them on time. But he made the adjustment because she stopped accommodating.
Okay.
And suppose he never made the adjustment. It's okay. It doesn't mean the whole relationship is in trouble. I mean, there are differences between, deal breakers and non-deal breakers. But so often, we have these scripts going on in our head about what this means and what it's supposed to look like, and we don't communicate that to each other. But there's a lot of feelings and things that get triggered in some of those interactions. But it's owning yourself. You're responsible for you. And so if you continuously put yourself in a situation where you're disappointed and you're upset, you might have to release that expectation that the other person is just supposed to rearrange their entire schedule to fit your particular need.
Right.
But we communicate that, we let it go, and then people are free to make the decisions and choices that they want to make.
Right.
And he eventually came around and made the one that she liked. But even if he hadn't, she made the adjustment, so she's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes, though, we overstep so often into each other's lives. Sometimes it's out of love, but sometimes it's really just out of not knowing better how to kind of stay in our lane.
So it really would come down to what your deal breakers are, how you, I guess, maneuver in a situation like that. Because say, okay, in that same instance, let's say he decided not to come home to eat dinner with the family just for whatever the reasons are. And then she started maybe to feel neglected. I know some women in a similar situation who may then feel like they're taking on more of the parental role over time. And then, that grows into some sort of resentment or maybe just overall, like her needs are not being met.
Yeah.
Then how would that work itself?
Right.
You should say that before you go. It's interesting you to say that when you talk about your needs not being met, we're in our space. We've been taught that, hey, we want our needs met. So if you don't meet my needs, this list of 10, you're not doing enough and you're focusing on the things that are not working. You're not doing this, you're not doing this. And by you constantly saying you're not doing this, you're making yourself miserable is kind of what I've heard what I heard you say, Krista, earlier. It's like, okay, if you don't want to comply with that, it's not a deal breaker, but I'm going to switch my energy somewhere else. So Tanis, what you're saying, what I hear you saying as well is, okay, what do you do in a situation where you feel like your needs aren't being met? And when is too much?
Right. And so this is really tricky ground because, again, you have to consider, what is your end goal? What is your intention? If you require your husband to be home at a certain time every evening to have supper with you before you start feeling neglected, then that's a little probably not just about supper, right? It's not just about that meal. So really, you have to consider that there may be a lot of other things going on. Supper is just a representation of something or something that makes you afraid. But that's usually either a past hurt or some other disconnect in the relationship. Because if it's really just about supper, we could get over that. It's a meal, you know? But if you have this picture in your head that a healthy relationship means that you're home for dinner and you're not somewhere else, or I'm afraid that you're cheating on me, that's a whole different kettle of fish from missing a meal. And so we have to consider, what are we really dealing with here? And this is where it takes sometimes professional help to help you kind of peel away those things that you are holding someone else accountable for, that really are your territory. If you're feeling neglected, if you're feeling not okay, there may be several things that you yourself can do, or places or areas you need to heal, so that that's not someone else's responsibility to make you feel a certain way. Now, if they're contributing negatively to your life, that's a different story, right? But sometimes it can be really tricky to tell how much of this is my baggage that I'm requiring you to heal for me, or to hide for me, or to fill in for me. And how much of this is something you're actually contributing to my life that wasn't there before you came into it. And there's a big difference there. And it's not always that easy to tell. Right. Sometimes, you know, this happens over time. We discover things, and this is why, you know, we're never quite ever really there. We're always growing. We're always healing. We're always learning something about ourselves. And you're hoping that in a relationship that is somewhat healthy, that we can both grow together. As I grow, as I learn more about myself, as I heal certain injuries or wounds that I might have had pre-you, or even within our marriage, I can say, you know, this really hurt me and I didn't know how to say that. So you couldn't have made an adjustment because you didn't know. But I need to tell you that when you do this, this kind of hurts. And so if that's something you need to continue to do, then we'll have to make an adjustment, because I can't participate in that with you. But that may not be deal breaker status, but it's still very important conversations.
Right. That's really good stuff. It's just making me think a lot, you know, about the growing aspect. I'm a big, proponent of, okay, listen, we need to grow together, and then sometimes you have one partner, could be the male or the female partner, that doesn't realize that they can use help. Like you said earlier, sometimes you need to go for therapy. You need to go to a professional to kind of unpack these layers as to why you're behaving this way, and then sometimes you have a partner that's resistant to that.
Yeah.
Nothing is wrong with me. I don't have a problem. Maybe you need to go see.
It's a you issue.
Maybe you need to go see.
It's a you problem.
I don't need it. Right. And that can be tricky when you're navigating a relationship. And another thing that came to mind is the dating, how deceptive dating can be, because each person's trying to put on their best face. They're treating you the best. Everything is just like top of the line. And then it tapers off. Now you have these expectations that were being met before, and now they're not being met. And you find yourself in this situation like you're talking about, like, okay, wait a minute. My needs aren't being met. You used to meet them. Now you don't. So now I got to put my attention somewhere. And I think that is why some people cheat.
No.
It's a big reason why some people go out and find someone else to get that, satisfaction. Hey, you're not meeting my needs, so I'm going to find someone else to go and help.
Yeah, and that's really tricky as well, because again, if we're talking about taking ownership of ourselves, ownership of our feelings, ownership of our decisions, if you choose to get some of your needs met by going outside of your relationship, that's a decision that you made, to deal with whatever your issues are in that manner. And so while some people feel completely justified, I would argue that there are much better ways to kind of handle that. Because again, we're so afraid sometimes of having a relationship fail that we look past some really important things. And so even getting your needs met in a relationship, I would ask you to please, anyone to kind of examine, because it is not anyone else's responsibility to meet our needs. It's our responsibility to get our needs met. Now, there's a lot of other things that go into this. I mean, historically, when you look at just the difference between men and women, and there's a huge disparity in terms of who has power in the relationship. And these are things that are just so subtle from our histories, from offenses sometimes that now we call cultural norms within certain communities, that men are revered, or, you know, they're allowed to do certain things. And that's a whole different conversation. But when it comes to understanding healthy boundaries, I am in charge of getting my needs met. And all I need is for my partner to be supportive of me getting my needs met, and occasionally participate in whatever I've asked of them, as long as what I'm asking for isn't, again, violating one of their boundaries.
Right.
The tricky part is that by the time you're learning about healthy boundaries, by the time you're recognizing what's mine and the issues that I need to deal with, the more I start to deal with my issues and the more you don't deal with yours, we're growing at different rates. And that can cause some tension in the relationship and make us question whether or not we want to stay in it or not. And it can be kind of tricky, because those are things sometimes. The reason why we don't sometimes set healthy boundaries, as we mentioned on the last show, is this huge fear of losing.
Yeah.
That if I grow at a different rate from you and I get to the point where it's making me sick to tolerate your lack of growth and your unwillingness to even examine yourself at all, I may get to a point where that becomes a deal breaker for me. Mm-hmm. And that's a scary place to be. Right. But it's like people who are in relationships where one of their partners has a substance abuse issue, you know, or an anger issue. It's like, if you cannot deal with that, I can't continue to, with a clear conscience, now that I've grown to understand that staying in this relationship with you and covering up my bruises for you, or making excuses to our children about why you're not coming to something that is important to them anymore because you're drunk or recovering, or you don't remember what you said to them. Like, I can't, in good conscience, now that I've grown to understand that's not healthy, keep myself in this situation if you're not willing to kind of examine yourself and work on that. So I can stay here with you, I can support you, but I can't do it for you. Like, you have to be willing to do your part and I'll do mine, and we'll see if it works. And if it doesn't, I didn't see this coming at the beginning of the relationship, but now that I've grown to understand that I don't like this, or this is unhealthy for me and my children, then, you know, and that's either, it doesn't matter which partner it is at that point. You know, sometimes husbands have to leave unhealthy wives. Any type of relationship, partners have to leave each other if there are things that the other is not willing to address, and it's causing disruption, it's causing pain, it's causing harm, trauma, etc. So there's levels, right? Not all of it is on the same level of offense or injury. And that's why how much you tolerate and what's healthy for you is a very personal discovery. It's a very personal list of things that pertain to you, your history, your own injuries, why, you know, somebody else might be able to tolerate it and I can't.
Right.
I can't do it.
Right. There's so much in what you just said.
There is.
So,
it's
so
very
much,
loaded.
You know,
very,
because
very
I'm
loaded.
hearing, you know, a little bit of, you know, potential narcissistic type of relationships. I'm hearing potential, you know, there's just so many aspects of it, you know, low self-esteem, lack of self-awareness, the struggle of, you know, the ride or die thing. You stay with me no matter what. Like, I'm hearing so many firecrackers are going off right now, and you're right. It's very layered. You know, there's, and it's individual. You know, it's based on individual, what they can tolerate, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. You know, but yeah, what do you have to say about that, Lady T? That was a
it's just it's
load.
Very multifaceted. And it's like, right when I think I'm getting my answer, I'm not, or I'm not sure if I am.
But you know, one thing that I can say that keeps on sticking out periodically is the importance of understanding, you know, that I'm in charge of me. You're in charge of you, right? So I need to take care of me first. If I can't depend on you to take care of me, it would be nice if you add to my joy or, my self-fulfillment or any of those things, but I can't solely depend on you for my happiness. It's about taking that power back, not in a, I'm doing me kind of thing, but in a loving, caring, compassionate way. I love you, but I love me too. And I really have to make sure that I'm whole and I'm taken care of. And I can't put that burden or responsibility wholly on you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it doesn't just kind of change overnight. You don't just realize this and then go executing this in your relationship. You're going to blow it up more, like for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's not quite what we're going for here, right? It may take a little bit of time. It may take a little bit of healing, but the first thing that we do is to just check in with ourselves.
Yeah.
And so before you try to force you and your partner maybe into therapy, if your partner's unwilling, it's okay for you to start, because there may be some things in your own life that you need to address before you're going to be really healthy enough to address some of the things within your relationship. And so it's always a good idea. I mean, whoever goes to therapy first is the one who's fighting for the relationship and know that they need to heal. And I always, when I work with couples, it's really tricky, because in the first conversation, it's usually this big announcement, right? And I will let them know that, listen, I'm here for you, whether you decide to stay together or you decide that you're better off apart. Like, my job is not necessarily to keep you together. My job is to help you get some clarity around where your injuries are, how you're going to heal from that. And then you have the clarity to understand or make a decision for yourselves, whether or not you can continue in the relationship or not. So my job is not to keep you together. My job is to give you and help you get the tools that you need to make those decisions very clearly for yourself as to what's in your best interest. And most people are just kind of like, they pull back on that one. Like, what? You're supposed to help us fix this.
Yeah, no. And that's new. And I'm very glad that you said that, because I didn't learn that until maybe, 7 or 8 years ago. I always felt that the purpose of going to see a therapist was, okay, let's fix this. But in reality, what I learned, it's to gain clarity. It's not, I mean, you could fix it, but fixing it could either be fixing it to stay together or fixing it to give you that clarity in order to, to move apart, because that's the best thing for the two of you.
Right.
And that's a tough one. That's a tough one
it's
too.
a growth. If we look at it kind of like what I mentioned before, it's a growth process, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe when the two of the individuals came together, they were in different places. They didn't know each other. They didn't know themselves, rather. That's what I meant to say. They didn't know themselves. And once they got to realize who they are, they're like, wait a minute, this really doesn't fit in my picture anymore. This is actually causing more harm than good. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to harm or injure myself any more that I have, especially if the other individual is resistant to change or accepting, their issues and the reality at hand. So more than anything, I think our listeners really could take away the importance of self-awareness. Learn thyself. You're not going to know everything, because we change. We're growing species. We're human beings. So we change. Yeah. But I think the number one key is, even when I got married, the first time I got married, I'm divorced, and I really honestly didn't know who I was going into that marriage. No clue what I was doing, why I was even there. Great guy, really good person. But I was just a lost human being that didn't know who I was. And then you have the pressure of, you need to stay married because you're not supposed to divorce. But then I had this conversation with Lady T, I believe it was with Lady T. And I was like, why? We can forgive a whole lot of other stuff, but what about a mistake when you feel like, I wasn't mature enough to make that decision? Why can't I be given another, a pass?
Or informed enough.
Mature enough.
Yeah, or informed enough.
So you have different religions and stuff that will condemn you for that, but it's like, I wasn't mature enough. Now I know better. I'm going to try to do better, my next go around. But like I said, if anything that I'm learning, because I'm still learning and growing through this process of boundaries, I have not mastered it. Trust me, I'm a baby in this thing, but I know how powerful it really is. It can really help you live a more fulfilled life and focus on you. Because at the end of the day, we all ask for, I want to be happy. I want to be fulfilled. I want to experience joy. But truth be told, a lot of that comes from you. You know, we have to find our ways to find what brings me joy. How can I bring joy to myself? Of course, you could enjoy joy with everybody else. It's great, but it doesn't always work that way. You know?
Yeah, and there's so many counter messages to that. And if you think about just the last 15, 20 years, you know, with the onset of social media and the fact that, you know, you used to be able to keep different parts of your life kind of separate from the other, and now everything is sort of lived online. There's an additional distraction. You know, there's this face that we put out there, and then there's the one behind the pictures that we post, or the comments or opinions that we have online. And so really working with someone, or working with one of your women's groups, or just with your girlfriends, to really have some interesting conversations about where actually did this come from?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where did I develop this idea that I supposed to behave like this in my relationship?
Yes.
Where did I get this expectation that he's supposed to do this, that, and the next thing? Because sometimes you realize that it was a movie you saw, or it was someone else's life, someone else's life that you thought you got a glimpse into.
Right.
And you really didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, how many times have you seen someone in a relationship or in a certain situation and say, oh my gosh, I want to be just like them? You want to be like what you're interpreting, you're seeing of them.
Right.
Right. And the authenticity of that, and that you may be able to achieve a particular goal, you know, in your mind that looks like what you want. But we have to be very careful of thinking that we know everything that there is to know about what that means, or what it costs them, or the process that you go through to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I want to just mention before we move forward is in my boundary book, because I have a different boundary book that I've been reading as opposed to Nicole's book. So in mine, it says, so remember the signs that you need boundaries. So the first one she mentioned was feeling overwhelmed. The other one was you feel resentful towards people for asking for your help. Next one was you avoid phone calls and interactions with people who might ask for something, which you have mentioned. We've pretty much gone through these ones. You make comments about helping people and getting nothing in return. That's a good one. You feel burnt out. You frequently daydream about dropping everything and disappearing. And you have no time for yourself. So those are just some of the other signs that you need to put better boundaries in place within your situation if you experience some of those ones. Yeah. Especially you frequently daydream about dropping everything and disappearing. Been there and done that one.
I know someone
exactly, because if I disappear, I don't have to say no.
You know?
Exactly. If I disappear, I don't have to say no. Right. You know, I don't have to have that uncomfortable conversation. I can just escape it all. And I never have to take ownership.
Yeah. Avoidance. Yeah.
So, as you talk about saying no, a lot of people have difficulty saying no. They say yes to everything, So how do you start to use the word no and start to get comfortable with it? Because for some people that the word no is so uncomfortable for them that they rather injure themselves and say yes.
Yeah.
Than to.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I always advise, like a good place to start, and it's a little easier to start saying this to people who are maybe not your immediate family or not your partner. So we start with some of these ancillary relationships to practice some of these things. But one of the easiest ways to get a little more comfortable with it is actually don't say no at all. But you also don't say yes either. So you give yourself room, and you can do that by stalling. So whenever anybody asks you for anything, you have to practice for maybe a month or two. I'm not really sure if I can do that. Let me check something and I'll get back to you. hey, can you lend me $50? You know what? Let me check something real quick and I'll get back to you. I don't even care if that means you go to the bathroom to say, okay. You don't want to give this $50. This $50 is earmarked for something. Don't do it. And it's like, you know what? I'm so sorry I don't have it this time, but maybe next time. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of practice not answering yes or no right away for anything. Even if you think the answer might be yes, just to practice it, let me check on that and let me get back to you. I don't really know exactly what's going on that particular day. Let me check something real quick. I'm not really sure what's going on. Let me check for you and I'll get back to you. I don't want to say yes and then I have to, take my yes back. Or I don't want to say no and I actually can do it. So let me just check and I'll get back to you. And so it's like not taking it on. Or I really need somebody to babysit for me next week. Can you keep my kid for me overnight? And it's like, whoa. It's like, let me check something. Like, I'm not really sure. Let me just check something and I'll get back to you. So if you practice initially, sort of not saying yes or no, and then really check in with yourself, like, how does your body react when you think about saying yes? Mm-hmm. How does your body react when you think about saying no? And it's like, okay, I'm uncomfortable with the no, but it would be a huge relief. Or if I say yes, I know I'm I don't want to say yes. Like, Right. But it gives you that at least that extra buffer time to kind of decide for yourself what's in your best interest. If you decide to push past your boundaries anyway, because you're not ready yet, that's okay. We're learning and we're growing. But the fact that you've been able to recognize I'm saying yes when I want to say no, that's a huge place to start, because it gets a lot easier after that. Okay. For sure.
I know we're coming down to time. We have about 9 minutes left. Lady T, I'm going to ask another question.
Sure,
I don't want to hog all the time, but I do have something. Going back to guilt messages, right? Okay. And the word should in relationships. I find that to be a big deal. And the reason why I say that is females and males, they have these roles that we play. And that says, you should do this, you should do this, I should do this, I should do that. And we get stuck in those roles. And if we don't perform those shoulds, right, or those expectations, that guilt message comes into play, right? So what type of relationship should we have with the word should? Because I hear that a lot. I should be doing this or you should be doing that. What type of relationship should we have with the word should? I know that's kind of like should. But you get what I'm saying.
Right. It all starts in your exploration with where did that belief come from? Right? Because it is so amazing to sit down and recognize that a lot of our expectations and relationships are driven by things we saw, things that we observed, values in our own home, behaviors in our own home. And if any of you out there are parents, it's a different perspective to understand that your children have like half a clue as to what is actually going on behind the scenes. So if you can think about that, how much your children actually know about all the things you're shielding them from, all the things that you're dealing with, all the things that you're trying to manage in your own life, you can kind of look back and say, you know what, I might not have really understood why my mom behaved that way, or why she took on all that responsibility, or why my dad behaved this way, or why my auntie or my uncle did this or did that, or what relationships was I observing, and where did this actually come from? Sometimes they're cultural norms, but even cultural norms have been shaped by a lot of trauma, and a lot of religious beliefs that we grew up with that we just kind of accepted blindly. And it doesn't mean they're all bad. It just means that we do need to examine where these things kind of came from, and then decide if these are things that we need to keep or things that we need to modify. Sometimes they need a little updating. It's not that the whole principle is should be thrown out the window, but how we execute it. There might be some layers of this that we don't really understand. And we need to understand, where did those shoulds come from?
Right. Yeah.
And do they need to stay there?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Sorry about that. One of the questions I have that I hear a lot from people who are whether married or in relationships is the defensiveness from the other person that they receive once they exert what their boundaries are. Mm-hmm. What can you say with regards to that? So, as a scenario, let's say I want to spend more time with my husband, just as an example. But every time I express that, there's a level of like defensiveness that comes with that. How what would your advice be to help maneuver through something like that?
One of the things to consider, because we don't always know exactly what all is going on, but when we're approaching, kind of confronting someone with something,
with the boundary.
Yeah, it's like, this is really important to me and I don't feel like I'm getting enough of it. And so I want to see, what can we do to address this, or what are some of the barriers to spending more time? Maybe I say something or do something a certain way that kind of pushes you away. So the main thing is to kind of remember to stay open. And when you're hearing defensiveness, it's generally an indicator that someone is feeling attacked. And sometimes that has a lot to do with how we say what we say. So when you say to your husband, you don't spend enough time with me, any conversation, any confrontation in particular that starts with you never, you always, you should, you don't, those are like fighting words, right? So the first thing is to just kind of switch it around. I would really appreciate spending more time with you. I feel like I miss you a lot, and I would love for us to spend some more quality time together. Is that something that you'd be willing to arrange with me? So it's about me. Mm-hmm. It's not about what you're doing or what you're not doing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is, and we have to say, when this happens, this is how I feel. And I would prefer that we handle it this way. But even that is an example of an I statement. You can look it up. Mm-hmm. There's a language that is compassionate, and that is, the word is escaping me at the moment, empathetic. Right? We have to have empathy for the other person. So even if they come back at us with, but I do all of this for you. And it's like, okay, I hear what you're saying. You work really hard for us and you're trying to provide for us. And I really appreciate that. Is there a way that we can kind of work in a little more personal time? So you empathize with the fact that the person might be feeling attacked, and it's like, okay. I recognize that, maybe that didn't come out right. What I'm trying to say is, and you may need to practice this mm-hmm. before you confront somebody. So you kind of understand what you want the outcome to be. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of know how to navigate. And if you don't, these are all tools and skills, right? This is a language that I speak every day. So I make it sound really easy, but, even just examining, like, where do I want this to go? How do I want this to turn out can help you choose your language a little bit differently. So defensiveness usually requires a bit of empathy, a calmer tone. Don't let them carry you into a power struggle. You're just trying to get your point across. And that is, I feel this, I would like this. Can we make this happen?
Right. And there's also layers to that. That's an excellent approach, that I feel oftentimes temper the temperature, right? If it's getting too hot, it doesn't help, because you find a reaction that I've experienced sometimes. It's almost like, okay, I can't attack you when you're coming at me with such loving kindness, consideration, right? But there's also, I know we don't have a lot of time, we have about 2 minutes left, but there's also the side of it where the individual is probably dealing with a lot of past traumas, and any little thing can trigger that reaction, no matter how sweet or kind it's, coming. But like you said earlier today, and we're learning, it's not about them. It's about us in the sense of, we got to take care of us. We
right. So it's our job to kind of bring it up and say something, and to kind of, be the piece that we want to see in the relationship, and give the other person an opportunity to kind of hear what we're saying.
Yeah.
But if we get into attack and defense, then that conversation isn't productive anymore.
It's lost.
Yeah. And so again, there's a lot of things that can contribute to that, but it starts with personal examination, self-awareness, and reaching out for help if you feel like you need it.
awesome conversation, Krista. We have less than a minute. Thank you so much. So insightful, very helpful. This is one I think I'll be playing every now and then. Thank you for coming on our show again.
It is absolutely a delight, and you ladies take care. And I really hope that if you don't take anything else away, it's talk to somebody and try to get those things sorted out so that you can preserve and heal yourself and your marriage.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista.
Okay, so there we have it today with Womanhood. Next up is Lucia D with Honey Drop. Thank you all for tuning in today. We hope you're able to take something away that will bless your life moving forward.